Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the seminar today. We have like an amazing speaker today, that Dr. Jim Lai. He's an acting director for the Student Office of Aerospace Research and Development based on Sao Paulo, Brazil. And he has more than 33 years of experience from the Air Force Research Laboratory. And as a prolific author, Dr. Lai has led over more than 100 diverse research efforts ranging from molecular electronics to space development. And I had the pleasure to meet Dr. Lai through Oliver and Nina, and Jim gratefully agreed to give a talk for us today, and we are very grateful for that. So thank you very much, Jim. He will present today an overview of the U.S. Air Force Office of Scientific Research, and he will talk about the grant funding process and the opportunities available for researchers in Latin America, and then among other topics. So we're truly fortunate to have Jim today, and it's very excited to the talk and the insight that he will share. So, please welcome me, everyone, to join Jim. The floor is yours, Jim. You can take the lead for now.
Okay, thanks, everyone. I'm glad to have a chance to talk to you about how you could receive funding and support for your best research ideas through our office. And I'm going to talk about that, but I want to provide some context, because the first question people might ask is why would the U.S. Department of Defense invest money in research outside of the U.S.? And so the U.S. Department of Defense has international investments in basic research. This is about advancing, I guess, since projects like the Manhattan Project during the Second World War, we realized that there is global talents, and I think more and more that's the case in the rise of publications. And the U.S. is no longer the global leader, so more and more we need to operate in an international environment. By funding basic research, civilization really at one level. We are accessing diverse perspectives, cutting-edge research, and there are global concerns. Cybersecurity, I think we all worry about that problem in even our personal lives, our bank accounts. Certainly, fund basic research, it's simply the best idea. Now, it's no secret that the United States Department, in 1 year, we are looking at a budget request of $143 billion. And research is done by groups like DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, and each of the military services, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army, have laboratories. So we also have, in global collaboration, we have international partnerships and strategic alliances. But what I'm going to talk about today is more academic research, the basic research in science. So one of the things I wanted to explain, if you work with us, is how we define research. And there's, like I said, billions of dollars of research. And we have, again, going back to the Second World War, we've established this kind of nomenclature for research 1, 6.2. And so 6.1 is basic research, which I'm going to talk about. And there is applied research. So as we get closer to bending metal and building real aircraft and spacecraft, we go up higher in this taxonomy. You may have heard of, and just to show you an idea. So although we spend a lot of money in research, you can see that only a small amount of it is basic research. These dollars wisely. You may have heard of the technology readiness level. This is another idea. This came from NASA, and it is when ideas essentially are formulated. You write them on a napkin. You wake up in the middle of the night. As you begin to test the idea and put it together and work in the laboratory, you start to move up this technology readiness scale. Eventually, as you do demonstrations in what we call relevant environment, that would be like if you were doing a spacecraft concept, putting it in the space environment. Eventually, you get to mostly focus on, we're focused on basic research, and we're focused on ideas at the low TRL. So if you want us to help you build a satellite, we may know in science, that's where we can help you. I take a minute to just make sure you understand that, because sometimes people will mention, this is TRL3, or I'm using 6.3 research money. Well, this would help you understand that a little better. The next thing I want to do, I'm going to try to do this really quick, is explain the hierarchy. How do we get from the Department of Defense to research offices in South America? So as everyone knows, and I think this is true in pretty much every country, we also have Space Force. That's a recent development. The Air Force has a number of what we call commands. So they're operational groups. And then the material command is the group that actually buys and equips the soldiers and the warfighters. They also, the Air Force Material Command, develops the F-15, the F-22. But amongst all the things that this group does, this very large group, we have the laboratory. So the entire research arm of the Air Force is under the Material Command, and it's based in Dayton, Ohio at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The lab has a basic science office that's in Washington, and then we have international projects, which include the office in South America. Now, this diagram there's a version of this for each of the services. I'm not going to go through that because I'm in the Air Force, and so this is our diagram. But the other services have also in Sao Paulo and Santiago. And I'll talk again about that, but this is just an overview. So let's talk about the laboratory. So this laboratory that we have has technical directorates. Now the technical directorates, and you can see it's a very large lab, if you count all the civilians, all the contractors, space systems, human performance, materials research, sensors, space vehicles is important kind of to me personally because I worked here before I came to Brazil. I worked in space vehicles, so I was involved in space electronics development. So these groups are in different parts of the United States. The Office of Scientific Research is one of these groups, and I'm going to talk about that. This is the group that does basic research. So very important to me is, and I'm sorry I didn't spell the acronym out, is the Air Force Office of Scientific Research. Okay, AFOSR. So I'm getting closer. So I'm going to spend, I didn't give the preface, but I'm going to spend some time making sure you understand who we are and why we are here. Then I'm going to talk about what we're looking for and how you can work with us. So I'm going through this first part so that you understand a little bit of orientation about how research is done or the offices. So AFOSR is an office in Washington, and that office contains all the science and technology portfolios and managers, and each person has something like 30, 50, even more individual projects in research. So complex networks, there would be a person there that is managing projects in network science and new and innovative ways, and basic research problems that affect complex networks. Same for all these other people. Over here, there are the international offices. So this is the first time you see us in the hierarchy. We are part of the international division, and we're part of the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, remote arm of the AFOSR. I'll explain that a little bit. So this is just the same information laid out a different way. So the Venn diagram, it's sort of like what we call the DoD, the material command inside the Air Force. The lab is inside the command. AFOSR is inside the lab. We have an office, and the international offices were set up in this map. The first one was set up in London in the 1950s. We then branched to Tokyo, and then later to South America. Aerospace Office of Scientific Research and Development. And we are here to do one thing, and that is to find and fund the best science. We want to find the very best ideas. We want you to publish and be successful. And that is our mission. And our mission is to give money to people for very special things. We're looking for the best ideas, the Nobel laureates. And we also are here remotely to connect researchers back to the US, back to the rest of the laboratory, to those groups I mentioned before. We can give you access to these groups. We can bring you to their facilities. We can have them interact with you and collaborate on your research. Okay, so we have two locations where I work. It's where I live at the U.S. consulate, and then in Santiago we have an office that's inside the U.S. embassy in Santiago. Here are some examples of research projects, and this is the international diagram. Now this time I'm showing you the offices for the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy, and we usually have an office, the same offices in the locations. So everything I say really extends to the other services, but again, I'm focusing on the U.S. Air Force, not the Navy and not the Army. All right, so understand a little bit about us, why we're here, and we have found that funding open research, we have put individuals in different parts of the world to manage the process of visiting, getting your ideas, helping for you, especially for science and research. So our quest of basic research is one that's kind of historical. There's definitions that are here. I'm not going to read them all, but the idea is that we're trying to advance human knowledge, human insight. People generally just want to do, especially in research, is that they just want to keep making things better using spears. But in basic research, we discover new ideas, DNA or artificial intelligence, quantum computing, new advancements in materials science. Now, there is applied research and basic research. So basic research is curiosity driven. Applied research is when we have a problem that are they distinct and separate? Well, we like to think so, but really they're intertwined. And so on one axis of this diagram, I said the quest for human or fundamental understanding. If there isn't very much understanding involved and there isn't really much utility, then we're kind of tinkering, right? I'm just doing something. I don't care why. I don't know that it has any value. Well, we don't want to fund that work. But then there's work where we're trying to solve a problem. It's applied research, but we don't really care about why. A pipe to last for 30 years. They don't care about the science. They just want the pipes to last for 30 years. But there is, in the upper part of the diagram, a need for fundamental advancements in science. In this quadrant, we talk about pure basic research. Maybe it's something like in computer science, there's a problem called P versus NP, which is one of the great open challenges of computer science. Or it might be some result in knot theory. It could be a lot of things. And we have no idea what this is for, but it's a fascinating problem. It involves a lot of intellectual activity. But then there are, so an example of that was when Louis Pasteur was trying to understand how to ferment sugar, how to create a process. And that was driven by a need in the industry to make alcohol from sugar. So, but why do we care about basic research? And I think deep down, we all like puzzles. We like to solve mysteries. Why? We thought we invented the gear, but it turns out nature invented it. It's in the legs of an insect. Long before man walked the earth, nature had solved the problem of gears. It turns out that stacking oranges, as you see in the grocery store, is actually a math problem. We have someone that wants to solve stacking oranges in 5 dimensions. Why? It doesn't seem to have a practical interest, but it might actually give you important results in coding theory. So there were things that made us want to become scientists and engineers. And we're interested in those ideas, especially ones that really advance our future. We're looking for Nobel laureates. There's many Nobel laureates who received funding for their work before they got the Nobel Prize. So maybe some of you on this phone, on this Zoom call, are future Nobel laureates. Well, we hope you are, and we hope we can help you. Okay, so now I'm going to shift and talk about how you can work with us. There's 3 tools in our toolbox, and the most important of these is the research grant. Our typical research grant is a project that we fund. You have an idea, we're going to give you money to work on that idea. We're going to give you typically about $50,000 US. That's a grant. Can it be more? Sometimes, yes. Can it be for 4 years? Yeah. It's the average. If you have a Nobel winning idea, but if you don't have a Nobel winning idea, what else could we do? Well, a lot of Nobel winning ideas start at conferences. Conferences are a great engine for innovation and collaboration. We support many conferences, and we can help you support your conference idea. Let's have a conference so that we can get good ideas. If you have an idea and you have connections to researchers in the United States, let's say you want to go visit the materials director to discuss some interesting research that you're doing on high entropy alloys. Well, we can send you through a program called Windows on Science, and we send researchers to the US frequently. Those collaborations or those discussions lead to ideas that get funded as grants, or they lead to conferences that lead to grants. So those are the things that we do. We've been in South America since 2009. We have funded over 300 projects, and our current portfolio is over 60 projects. This is a breakout of those activities. We work in Central America and in South America. Most of the projects, as you can see, by number, are in Brazil. That makes sense. Chile makes sense when you realize that we have an office in Chile. We're working on trying to get more projects in Colombia and Peru especially. Some of the questions that you might have is, okay, well, what about my intellectual property? Are you going to take all my ideas? Well, no, we want you to publish in open literature. You keep the property rights for yourself. We get the benefit from your collaboration, the same benefit that you get. What, again, do we expect? Well, your ideas may succeed, they may fail. Either way, you learn something. Either way, you publish. We want you to publish your results in open peer-reviewed journals, conferences. These basically are what make the research world go around, is the publications, discussions, and exciting work. There are, on this chart, I just show that there are, additionally, this is the Air Force, there's Navy and Army. So I kind of like to call it Team DoD Science. We're the Department of Defense, and we have science guys. Some of us are kind of geeky. We like strange research. There are the other AFOSR offices in the US, the other AFRL tech directorates. Sometimes an idea you have doesn't look like basic research. I might talk to my colleagues at AFRL and see if they have interest. I'm only an expert in a very limited number of things. If you give me a project in biomedicine, I will probably go back to AFOSR and talk to them. And within the US government, while the Department of Defense funds a lot of basic research, the National Science Foundation, they also fund work. Strangely, these groups do not provide often as much funding for international groups. And so we have sort of an interesting position in that while we're the Department of Defense, we also provide a lot of the funding from the US to other countries for international work. Here's how grant processes work. We have a persistent call for proposals. I can give you the URL. I don't recommend that you immediately run to that website and start submitting your grant. We like to go through a process. This is the start of the process. I'm talking to you right now. Initial contact. I have white paper templates I will send. You basically capture your idea in a white paper. It's like an abstract that you would write for a technical paper, but it has a few more details like funding, what are you going to do, etc. It should be well enough described that I can send the white paper to others for discussion, evaluation, co-sponsorship. So we may go through this process of submittal, revision, because, I think the idea is to get white papers quickly, good or bad, and let's talk about them. Let's see if we can improve the idea. So when we get an idea that looks like it's ready for support, we will then tell you to go to that website and put your proposal together at grants.gov. Then we will go through a full review process and award the grant. You'll do your research and you'll publish. So this is the sort of workflow, if you want to use that term, for grant funding. This is a white paper template. I actually have a Word template that I will send, and it can be distributed to you. This is the long name for the URL and the grant. And as I mentioned, the grants are typically 30, 50,000 for 3 years. And I think at that point, I'm kind of close to the end of my presentation. This is my contact information. And if you're saying, well, how do I get started? I would say, send me a white paper. You say, what's a white paper? Well, send me, don't already have it, the template, and we'll talk about how to get this put together as an idea and how to help you get support. This is our office. I have a URL right now, just points to the parent organization, but you'll be able to get to us through there. And this is the URLs for the Navy and the Army. They work down the hall from me, so I can talk to them and send your white papers to them as well. And I think that's all I was going to present. So I'm going to stop the screen share and I'm ready for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Jim. Yeah, like it seemed was very insightful presentation. So yeah, then everyone, let's then get the question. Feel free to post it on the chat. I can read it, or just jump and mute yourself and ask the questions.
Yes, please ask me questions.
Yeah. So I can. So I can start with one question, then just to break the ice in that sense. So in terms of like when you were mentioning like supporting novel ideas or conference, or like there is like a predefined like funding or limit when if either a novel idea or a conference, or that is happening in the discussion, like the budget that is going to go for the grant, and like what is going to get the decision is based on like it is a predefined budget for each of those, or this is happening as the discussion goes.
Let's see. I guess I'm trying to understand. So if you're asking about, of course, I've talked about the amounts and the duration for a typical grant. We will typically be funding student salary, postdocs, travel, small equipment purchases, publication charges, disposable materials. I would consider those the normal things. For a conference grant, that's actually going to be a smaller amount, up to 50% of a conference. We can usually that will involve things like maybe facility rental. We're not allowed to pay for alcohol. We're allowed to pay for a lot of other expenses. I have a whole list of the categories, but usually keynote travel, student travel, for some, student travel. And those are those are some things I would comment about funding and funding categories. I don't know if that answered the question, but feel free to ask other questions.
Yeah, I think that answered the question. Thank you. So Will, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Rodolfo. Hello, Dr. Like. Thank you so much for your presentation. I actually have two questions, if that's okay. I'd like to ask the first and then the second. So the first question is related to the research grants. I was wondering if you only fund one researcher as a person, or maybe if this researcher has also students working with him, like master students or undergrads, if the grant is also possible to cover their expenses.
Yeah, in fact, that's the normal case. So the normal case is that we receive a investigator. That principal investigator usually is a team. I mean, he might, he or she is the lead investigators. So it's very normal. We only work with nonprofit organizations, so you are not allowed to get a profit on the grant. It's and so it's usually universities. A lot of times we have found that the university does not handle Brazil, for example. Every university has a foundation, and sometimes we'll get the grant submission from the foundation, and then they handle the money and work with the university. So that's the normal case.
Okay. And the second question is, in your presentation, you showed some examples of projects that were funded by the AFOS in Latin America, but I'm not sure if you have accepted or worked with groups in artificial intelligence in Latin America before. So have you ever accepted any submissions from AI? And if yes, if you can maybe comment on something and give examples of the things that you are working with these groups in Latin America.
Yes, we have funded projects in artificial intelligence, and that's one of the obviously very hot areas right now. The challenge is finding where is the new science and new basic research. So an example of one that we funded, it's in Porto Alegre. We funded a project that's looking at the radiation effects of neural networks. So as we know, neural networks structure and many connections, the neural networks still work. They say that they have redundancy. So we're studying that. And in that particular project, we've made a connection to a Brazilian satellite project, and we're looking at opportunities to try it on orbit. So it's basic research, but maybe there's transitions and we could study and learn a lot. So yes, we would fund. But an example of what I'm less excited about funding is when someone comes to us and they say, look, I have a very interesting problem. I have a lot of labeled training data, and I would like to use like a type of neural net, like a convolutional neural net, and I want to examine the patterns and study. And I would say, well, that's like what that would be a normal thing. This is more like a design problem. Where is the science behind that? I believe in many cases it's a good thing to do, but it's not basic research. So I am struggling often to find the AI projects that really advance our knowledge, and I'll work with you on that. And maybe in some cases your application's exciting, and maybe we can find someone that will fund it, but maybe it's not us. But so the answer is yes. We do hand raised. Other question? Cone?
Yes.
You have your hand raised. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess you're referring to me. Sorry, the connection is not great. Some glitchy, so I hope you can hear me. I have two questions as well as Will. First one is like the project can be too specific, maybe for your like leading research. So it's like at the time of applying, should I apply everything like through you, or should I look for the program manager of like related research to my proposal? And if that's the way to go. So where can I find the list of these program managers?
I think the best way is to start with us. I mean, that's kind of what we're here for, is we can help connect you to those program managers. The list is ever changing, and it's not always obvious, not even to us, who the right person is, because your idea may straddle 3 areas of interest. So I think it's always correct to start with, and it might be that you still know of a name, you saw a presentation, you can contact them. They may end up coming back to us for help. I mean, you had a second question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for answering the first one. Second one is like one of the, I will say, like main problems we have had so far in Latin America is like that of NSF. Like if we, let's say we work as collaborators for some like US-based PI, it's impossible for them to actually like transfer some funds for us in the like Latin America. Is this opportunity also like go like both ways? So maybe I can apply with some PI based, US-based PI to like AFOSR directly in the US and get some funds from there? Is that some like possibility as well?
Hello?
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, we miss you for a few
I'm
minutes.
sorry. I don't know what happened, but I'm back. I'm sorry, sir. I missed the second question. If you don't mind repeating, I apologize.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about that. Yeah, I was saying like if this sort of collaboration, like one of the problems we had or I have experienced in Latin America as a professor is like we can apply to NSF, or US based can apply to USF. We have some collaboration with the US, but they cannot transfer any funds to Latin America. So it's like you are basically constrained to acquiring that sort of funds. So I was thinking and willing to ask you, like, is this sort of collaboration with Latin America go both ways? So in the sense of maybe I can apply as a not principal investigator, but as a co-investigator with some PI in the US, and then like, can they transfer some funds like for like conducting some part of the research in Latin America as well?
Yeah, so you've identified an important problem in the National Science Foundation in the US. They largely are supporting US research. The only simple way to get money from NSF is if you are a we use the word subcontractor, but it would be so like it might be someone like Georgia Tech. They would be sending the proposal to NSF, and they have you as a subcontractor, a sub-investigator. It's not the right word, but you can get money that way. So in that case, that's the model that works. On the other hand, we could fund you directly. And that is a unique thing. It's kind of strange that the Department of Defense has the ability to do something that the NSF does not have. In the very beginning, after World War II, the original vision was to establish a single agency to do all basic research in the US government, and it was going to be called the National Science Foundation. So while they were doing that, the Navy said, well, I don't know if that's going to be good enough for us. We got to have our own basic research group. And that was the first office. So then the Army said, well, if you're going to have one, we're going to have one. So while and the NSF was not the first, it was supposed to be, but the other ones came. So I don't know. That's kind of how it all happened.
Okay.
But
yeah, I was curious to ask that, because I guess right now there are some like pairs in the department that have some funding from ONR. So it seems ONR, DARPA are willing to. So I was just double checking with like if the same in Air Force, for instance. So.
Yeah, no, and DARPA does have an international office, but for some reason they haven't done what we've done. So we can reach out to them as well. Now, one of the things that makes it's important to understand is not only do we fund basic research because we think it's the best idea, we do it because it's easier. If you start doing things that are classified or complicated, I mean, it gets to be a problem. Then, so we can move pretty quick. We can get research projects set up in a few months. But if you go through classification and that, it's very difficult at that point.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Like. That's clear enough. Thank you.
Okay. Great questions.
So one question related to what we have talked there is like, so then like when researcher contact you, can be in any topic, and then you will try to connect them with the right office that it will be related to what they send you. So they can send proposals in AI or proposals in biology or something. Like it can be any topic. There is like not any specific like set of topics that I saw in Latin America look for, or like it's open to everything.
That's correct. You can send us ideas about anything, and we'll try to help you. That's I guess partly when we're remote office, we're trying to represent a projection of the central office down, and they have the 37 areas or whatever, but you might be in something that's not any of them. We'll still work with you, of course. Those 37 areas at one time also didn't exist. Some idea came and eventually became its own portfolio. So, I mean, I have a direct interest. I would love to talk about, I mean, my background's in microelectronics, and my work is I'm interested in what happens with Moore's law when Moore's law doesn't work anymore, and I have a whole bunch I could say about that. But I am looking at things that are very strange, like self-assembled nanoblocks, and how can we keep Moore's law going for things like large language models? Because as you can tell, they are only going to get worse and worse and more complicated and chew up more energy grid and need more computing power. So they say Moore's law is going to end, but it can't end. We need it to keep going so we can do more work in AI and large language research. And there's other areas that are just really bizarre. This is the nature of disruption, right? Sometimes an idea is something that everyone ignores until suddenly. I think large language models are extremely disruptive. They just seem to suddenly appear on the scene to most of the world. And so you may have yet another bizarre idea that I cannot imagine that will be a future disruptor. And I would like to find that idea. I'd like to get credit for having helped discover the person that came up with that idea. You know, things like the nature of consciousness, you know, we are funding a project in the Sao Paulo region on artificial, it's called anti-fragility in real systems. So anti-fragility. So we're looking at systems that actually are capable of modifying their own structure in response to damage, to evolve the way that we do as organisms. And as far as we can tell, there doesn't seem to be anything quite like that in man-made systems. So I'm very interested in these strange problems. And so I get real excited when I see something like that and try to find ways to support it. And it may not fit any of those nice little portfolios.
Yeah, nice. That was great answer in general. So then, like you will say that there is like two ways. One is like directly contact with you, and then like you will try to find if the idea is great, like try to find support for that idea, even there is no any grant opening, like the new grant can be open for that idea. And the other way can be like through the actual grant, like like through actual like kind of existing proposal, people check what are like the proposals on the grant website, and then they reach out to you to ideas about that proposal as well before applying to the grant?
Um, yeah. Well, I mean, I think we always recommend you contact us. It's very frustrating to spend a lot of time and effort to put a grant submission in and it's rejected. We're trying to avoid that problem by essentially it's like a pre-qualification. It's kind of like, well, if we have figured out this white paper and it looks really good and everyone's on board and we tell you to submit, at that point it's more like 100% probability. It's closer to 100% probability. And I think I won't say it's close to zero if you don't do what I said, but it's lower probability.
Yeah. So, any other questions on the audience?
Just double checking, like best way, like moving forward, is to write you an email with the white paper and then build up on that, right?
Yes, that's our formula, so to speak. The workflow I showed you in the presentation. That's what we're here for.
Great.
That's our, and we can come visit you. That's the other thing, is because we, being based, especially in Sao Paulo, is kind of centrally located, or it's, there's lots of flight, and I can set up visits. Yeah.
So in terms of if different people like contact you with similar ideas, like there will be like collaboration, like it will be created like a project for them to collaborate together, or like how, if that happen, like how that works, like same ideas, it will be just one selection, or there will be multiple selections and they can collaborate.
Well, we don't, because the topic is very general in nature. It's not like, if it's anything like what you call a down select, it's going to be more like there's so many ideas that our limited budget would be drained and we have to prioritize based on merit. But if there are 5 great ideas on one subject, we might fund all 5 of them, I've managed many in the US. I was in the laboratory for 33 years in Albuquerque. So I managed many of those other kinds of projects where it was a single topic and, we could only fund like 2 or 3. And so we had to down select from a bigger pile of candidates.
So yeah, one other thing like that, I got curious, like how is different from the programs in US in terms of like once you get your idea approved, you get the grant. So how is then like execution goes? Like there is like regular PI meetings, like kind of visit to the universities, and like there can be a decision to don't continue the funding. So how that works after the grant is approved?
In our case, I think it's pretty simple. Once you're awarded, at least I will typically, the South American office, we will typically ask you to do a kickoff meeting. The kickoff meeting is usually virtual. You will simply take the idea you proposed and represent it. But what I'll do is I'll invite colleagues, and they like this call that we're doing. This might be the kickoff meeting, and you're doing a 30-minute summary of what you proposed, and that will generate discussion. After that, you'll be doing your work, and you have to do like an annual short technical report, and then there's a final report at the end. You're publishing along the way, and we typically do not have go, no-go decisions at the end of each year. So far, I don't know of an instance where we've terminated a project for that reason, and that should be helpful to you because there's no pressure to be good enough for the next year's funding. If you have a 3-year project, if you're awarded, you're almost always just going to keep getting the funding.
Yeah, I think that's great. And
Yeah,
so there is a chat question. So I would like to clarify these calls you talk about NGOs. In case the university I'm affiliated with have not a foundation, could the grant still be delivered to them, or it is better to apply individually?
We will not be able to work with individuals, so you'll probably have to work with the university. It's not unheard of to work with a university that does not have a foundation. It's just often that the university is not used to the bureaucracy. In order to apply for a grant in the US, you have to have an account at grants.gov, and then the institution has to apply for a sam.gov account. And it's, I find even in the US, it's difficult. The universities in the US also, especially small ones, large universities will have a department that does grants, and they're handling many grants. But smaller ones, it's more ad hoc. So I think that's going to be your experience if you are not using something like a foundation. But it is possible to do a university or a nonprofit organization. We cannot do contracts to individuals, and we cannot do them to for-profit companies.
Thank you. Yeah, any other questions?
yeah.
So there is any concluding remarks that you want to mention, Jim, about like the future, or something that you want to mention as concluding remarks for everyone here?
Well, I think just to restate the main points, our mission in Latin America is to find and fund the best research. It is something I feel is one of the best. This is certainly one of the best things I've ever done in my life, is to come down and do something to advance science, and to do it in this particular way. I really feel that I've worked with a lot of really smart people. Before I came to Brazil, I was at the University of New Mexico. I was an adjunct professor there. I had Peruvian students. I was on their committees. One of them formed a multi-million-dollar company in the US, very successful, extremely talented people, but they don't have often the backing of large facilities and other things. And I think that because of that, they're not noticed as much. And so I would like to change that. And I think Latin America has a lot of promise in the future of things like semiconductors, which today people say they're not players at all. I said they should be, because I've seen a lot of innovation that will affect the future. And I think everyone's going to have a hard time at the end of Moore's Law. That's just in my area. But there's just a lot of innovation. And so, but in order to do this, I have to know where the ideas are. I have to find them, and we can help design and create conferences that increase awareness of your work. With the Windows on Science, I can send you to the US. I want to change in my little tiny way with this little office. I want to try to change and improve the reputation, of science and innovation in Latin America. So I think with that, that's most of what I would say. Just the other thing is, please send me your ideas, and I'll try to help you.
Yeah, very, very grateful. Yeah, so feel free, everyone, to reach out to. So we will share the recording in the recording, and we are going to share again the contact from Jim. So feel free to reach out to him and ask any other questions and share your ideas. Yeah, very, very grateful. So with that, we have to thank again, like Jim, for give us the time and all the information. I think was very helpful and useful. And thank you also everyone for joining the meeting. So yeah, have a great day, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much, everyone. Yeah,
Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.